So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Ruut Veenhoven, that you're sitting with me here on this sofa and spend some time with us to answer some questions that we have and would like to answer in this workshop. The workshop is on the future of happiness research, and it is wise, I think, before we look into the future, to look back. And who is better to us than you, who contributed since his PhD more than 5 decades on happiness research. You are, Alex Michalos called you the Pope of happiness research. I like that very much as a Protestant, probably. The founding editor of the Journal of Happiness Studies, the author of countless super influential papers, the director of the World Happiness Database, an enthusiastic researcher and award winner who never retired from research for the betterment of the human condition. So thank you that you are giving your time, spending the time with us to answer some questions that we have. So what is your insight when you look back? What are the greatest achievements of happiness research until today?
I think the greatest achievement is separating the different notions of what a good life is and singling out life satisfaction, which happens to be measurable and which is quite indicative of how well people flourish. Rather than measuring flourishing in itself, it's hardly definable, but you need an indicator of how well an animal is doing. Well, and the animal, a human animal, when it feels good, then apparently it flourishes. And you see there is a strong relationship between how much we like our life, how long we live, and how healthy and productive we are.
Fantastic. And do you think that there is something missing in the research of subjective well-being nowadays in the social sciences?
Well, there's always something missing because the truth is always complex.
What are the main areas that you think that we should work more in the future? What are the main topics or methods that we should focus in the next generations?
I think the main question, why do you do happiness research, is to help people make informed decisions. Should I be an academic, for instance? And then it's worth knowing how other people who chose to be an academic, how they have fared, and or whether comparable people who went in business had in the end a happier life. So I think that we should focus on what works for whom. And that doesn't fit too well with our training, because we are trained to find eternal truth in theories that apply everywhere. These don't exist. Happiness is an outcome and very much dependent on the situation and on your capabilities. And so it's an ongoing project to single out what has worked. You cannot look into what has worked for whom. And that is, for the use for individuals, but it's also for governments. But there can be times and situations when fast economic growth is good for the happiness of most people, and times when there should be other priorities. Well, it's our job to identify these differences.
And should then, in the future, happiness researchers talk more closely with politicians, or where do you want that happiness research is going to?
In the end, it must be transmitted to the users of the information. Now, I think what we do have for individual choice, there is a good lifestyle press. And they can, what we find, they tell it in ladies' journals, even in soaps. And I think that information is well possessed. And the same actually for the political implications. And we should do our job in figuring out how things are, and there are other people who make a living in selling our products. And of course we should make it accessible for them, and we should check whether they don't change the message too much. But in principle, it's a division of labor.
But if you could imagine yourself or put yourself into the shoes of a Ministry of Research and Education, how much money would you devote to happiness research, and in which direction would you like to spend the money?
Well, and then it depends. So, suppose I'm in the Ministry of Education, and then I hear that high educated people, people like us, are hardly happier than dummies. Well, if your business is more education, then at least I should wonder, first, is that really true? And next, why is that? And unfortunately, no such person in the Ministry of Education has yet asked that. Typically, they follow the complaints of the day, I would say, and there are always complaints about education, classes being too big, and people dropping out of education. Well, then dropping out, then I would say, is that really bad? If you look at the data, then typically you don't see that people who dropped out are less happy. And you can also interpret it as, well, these young guys, they soon discovered that it was not their trip, and they did something else, and that's why they are happy. But in the ministry, it's not only that they govern education, but they are also part of the educational lobby. And lobbies are not interested in data that don't really fit their business.
Their purpose.
Yeah.
And if you would have money for research, what kind of research would you fund?
Then I would fund my own research. And that is not producing ever more data, because we have already almost too much of it, but organizing it. And I think one of the problems of research, and it's not just the problem of happiness research, is that we amass enormous amounts of data, which we throw on the academic forum, hoping that the real truth will be distilled. Yeah, but that doesn't happen, and most of the data are forgotten, and you can only prevent that if there is an institution who filters out. Now, in the medical science, that exists, and at least they have a good database of experiments. Well, and you can single out for different treatments of different diseases. Still, I think it's not perfect because it's actually a database of abstracts. But in the medical science, terminology and statistics are pretty similar, so you come a great deal with these abstracts, and on that basis they do meta-analysis. In our trade, it's much more difficult, because we don't have a good agreement in how we name things, and so you cannot compare abstracts, and you have to take the data and in one technical language describe what's going on. But I think that is far more effective in the accumulation of knowledge than starting another panel study.
Yeah, I think exactly this leads perfectly to the presentation in our workshop, because we will focus also on big data, or the presenters will focus on big data and how we can make use of them for future happiness research. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, for your insights, and for your inspiration.
And any last reflection after all your decades doing research on happiness? Any last message for the future generations of researchers of happiness?
Well, it's a fabulous concept. You do good work and you will receive bad pay.
Indeed. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.